So welcome to the Seattle Angel Conference Workshop Series. This is a regular Thursday workshop that we do as a part of our process of helping startups be more fundable and helping investors figure out how to invest in fundable startups. And Tristan has been doing a lot of work on lean startup and a bunch of corporate innovation things, which I think aligns, pretty strongly with the work that we generally work on. So we reached out to a much wider audience this time to try to engage people in this conversation of going from the chaotic, which is how I expect most of the startups to feel, to some kind of pattern and rhythm and predictability. And I argue that a startup that has not yet bounded at the cost of customer acquisition is still a startup, not a business. And so that process of figuring out what the fuzzy financial model is and how that might relate to the actual predictable financial model that the accountants think they have is an interesting conversation. So rather than going around and getting 100 people to introduce themselves, hopefully you met somebody interesting, you got a new point of view, and we'll just leap in with Tristan and go from there. So Tristan, take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Sean. Greetings, everybody. I know that there are people on in at least 3 different countries on this call that I recognize, hopefully maybe a couple of others here. Do me a favor, and just to kick things off a little, since I know we have a decent sized number of people here, everybody just go into the chat window, make sure you know where it is, and please type in your location. What city are you in, and or country? Just let me know where you are right now. Hopefully I can see if my internet is still working. Nope, and the answer is no, but John, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can. You're doing great.
Great, okay. So the good news is that
Irvine, Belgium.
Nice, okay. So the good news is that I can still talk and hear you, but the bad news is that my video is definitely going in and out, so this will be a little bit sketchy on that end. So what I'm going to ask, John, is kind of keep yourself unmuted and just let me know a little bit what's happening in the chat, because I can't always read it. And then as soon as my internet kicks back on again, you'll see me chatting away on the video as well. Is that all right with you, John?
Yep, works great.
Great. So thank you all very much for joining me. This particular workshop is kind of one that's near and dear to my heart, because I think that in the last, 10, 12 years, since we started really getting into the heart of design thinking and lean startup in both the startup space and the corporate space now more and more, we have, as a group, kind of migrated more towards qualitative data, which has in general been a really, really good thing. Right? We've done a lot of good by kind of telling people to discard their 4-year business plans, those business plans that just are absolute fiction, they're absolute lies that we construct to convince whatever venture capitalist or angel investor we might be talking to, or business sponsor, that we can predict the future, and 4 years from now, 10 years from now, we're going to be billionaires. And so that's to some degree good. We've replaced that with a one-page business model that allows us to really represent our assumptions and represent them as such, right? Represent our assumptions in a way of saying we don't know if this is true, but here are the things that we know, here are the things that we don't know, and we have a plan to get from uncertainty to veracity, to absolute certainty that this business model will work. But along the way, we kind of absolutely ditched the financial model. We just kind of threw it away entirely and said, it's not relevant. All you need to do is go talk to customers. And at some point in time, you'll have to put some numbers to paper. But until then, it's not so much of an issue. So my question for everybody, for starters, is how many of you have kind of felt the same thing? How many of you have felt that the financial model has sort of gone away to a degree that is, at this point, unacceptable? John, you'll have to tell me what everybody's writing.
Yeah,
I can't see.
So Kimberly says, yeah. nobody else is typing in the chat at the moment. Caitlin says, not been her experience.
Oh, that's
Ryan
good.
says, yes. Nora says, don't all you need is a hockey stick. And he's being cynical in the normal way. Curious about
Cynical
what
is a good thing.
like given assumptions.
Yeah, I think all of that sounds right. I'm glad to hear some of you are still using some form of financial model. I do think that is a good thing. I want to kind of break down what I think is the problem with financial models and what I think we can kind of realistically do about it. And I will attempt to show you my screen. Honestly, I don't have hugely high hopes because I've wound up somehow in a hotel that's not super high tech here. But I'm going to try and share my screen and we'll see if this works. I don't know. Can we see this?
Yep, we're seeing your screen.
Probably just the wrong part of my screen.
If you
we'll get a little closer here.
Send me the deck, I can show it for you.
Now let's just go with this. Right. Here's what people think when they think of financial model. They think of a whole bunch of numbers fit on the page that are essentially wild guesses as to what is going to happen in 2023 and 2024 and so on and so forth. And the general reaction to this is, oh dear God, please not this. Let's not force ourselves to put in numbers that we can't possibly be held into account to. And of course, I can't remember who said it, but probably Norris. Yes, it is a hockey stick. And that is kind of not working very well. And the reason those business models don't work very well is that even when we base them on actual data, we're using linear projections and kind of single point projections as to what is happening. And what happens when you do that is you basically just get a bunch of garbage coming out in terms of predictability. So we have early stage market data. It basically looks very, very similar to a flat line. If you make a projection off of it, you see unequivocally that this is a bad investment, that we should absolutely not invest in this project and never go for it. But hopefully what happens is the startup does okay, and you start getting a little bit of growth stage data, which starts to curve up and to the right. And if you run that kind of standard linear projection again, you're going to wind up with a line that goes very far and off to the right. And there's your hockey stick, Norris. But of course, what's probably going to happen is that when you get more mature, it's going to level out. And essentially, no matter what you put, what individual number you put, whatever precision you lend to that spreadsheet and to the guesses that you're putting in inevitably winds up being wrong. So instead, we replaced it with this business model canvas and a whole bunch of sticky notes, but unfortunately, that does not tell us what we need to do. At some point, you do need to create some financial projections, either for your business sponsor if you're in a corporation, or if you are a startup, you need to tell the venture capitalist at some point how you are going to make money and how you're going to get to that hockey stick. And that leads us to what I think some people call innovation accounting. By the way, I should mention so far that I would very much like you all to interrupt me. I am talking to a screen. I can see some of your faces, but it's much more preferable for me if you just stop me and say, hey, I don't agree, or that's wrong, or that wouldn't work in my industry. And you can either type something in the chat, and John is going to interrupt me and tell me that I'm full of it, or you can just unmute yourself and start yelling at me. Either way works for me. I'm from New York, and I'm sitting in New York right now, so I'm feeling that New York energy. And so you can go and heckle me all you want. So Ryan knows what I'm talking about. All right, so innovation accounting. This is not a good projection. Right? The principal problem here is that we are trying to guess at the things that will happen very, very far in the future. And what we need is something that doesn't really look like this or any one of these productions, but actually looks like something East Coast folks will be very familiar with. How many of you have seen some sort of chart like this, especially in the past few months? See a whole bunch of people nodding. That's good. Nodding is good. It means, number one, my internet connection is working, and number two, you have seen this before, both of which bring me joy at this instant. So this is a hurricane chart. Yeah, the thing I love about hurricane charts is not only do they tell me if I should bring my umbrella out or not, but because they predict things in a very particular way. You'll notice they're incredibly not super specific, right? Like it's very specific as to what is happening at 5 a.m. on Tuesday in this chart. But after that, things start getting fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier, which makes sense because at Tuesday at 5 a.m., we know where the hurricane is. We can see it. There's somebody who has a satellite which is looking down at it. But as you go further and further into the future, this chart widens, right? It's called the cone of uncertainty, and it gets wider and wider as it goes into the future, such that by 2 a.m. Sunday, the area that the hurricane could be in is incredibly wide. I'm probably going to embarrass myself, but I think it might even hit Greenland, if that is Greenland. Is that Greenland?
No.
I don't know if that's Greenland. I don't feel very confident about that.
That's come on. Where's your Canadian knowledge?
Oh my God.
That's Newfoundland.
Oh dear God.
Newfoundland.
Get a Sharpie as well.
Newfies and their what is it called, Peter? It's like a drink called like Screech or something. Screech.
Screech. Good for you. Okay, you've redeemed yourself.
I've redeemed myself on Canadian knowledge. Okay, good.
Yes.
So you know clearly now that I'm not into geography. Which shouldn't be a surprise to most Americans on this call. All right, but anyway, point is, it could be anywhere. It could be in Greenland. I just don't know because I can't even read a map. Now, this is a great sort of chart because it represents uncertainty. It tells me that it could be over here and it could be over here, and that uncertainty is getting wider as we go. And that is an ideal situation. That is what we would like our financial predictions to actually say, instead of giving us this just kind of pure line and telling us, you will be here, you will be a billionaire. What I want that projection to say, especially on day 0 of a startup, is either you will be a billionaire or you will be a pauper. Because either of those things, well, one of those things is more likely than the other, but both of those things are possible. And that's the sort of chart I'd like to see. I'd like to see a chart that looks something more like this, that tells me, look, it's possible you'll be a billionaire. It's highly unlikely, but it's possible. It's also unlikely you're going to fail utterly. Maybe more likely you're going to be somewhere in the middle. And now this is something I can base decisions on. From an investor standpoint, even from a founder standpoint, I don't need to be 100% certain that I will be a billionaire or that in this chart I'm going to make 15 million a month. I don't need to know that I'm 100% certain to hit that. But I would like to know that I'm at least 10% certain to hit that. If it's $1 billion, I'd like to be at least 1% certain. Go ahead.
You can count on me to interrupt you. When
Please.
You look at a chart like this, how much is this what the investor is already doing, whether you give it to them or not? In my experience, if you give someone a very realistic projection, they're still going to cut it down unless you have a long enough conversation to really explain your assumptions and your thinking and all of that. So if somebody were to give you a chart like this that shows highly unlikely, unlikely, very likely, are you still going to make your own assumptions about whether or not what they think is likely and what you think is likely is the same, and kind of speak to what you present versus what people actually hear?
I think that's absolutely true. I just don't think they're doing it very well, because this is not something that you can mentally model out in a second and do. What's really happening is you're kind of saying, I will get $1 billion. And then the investor is going, well, I think you're being overly optimistic, so I'm going to say you're only 10% likely to hit that. So if I multiply 10% by $1 billion, I get $100 million, and that's my mental math. And now I have to decide, is it worth investing in you? And I think the main problem with that method of navigating this is that we wind up in this kind of, I almost want to call it like a steeplechase to falsehood, right? Because I, as an entrepreneur, now know that the investor is discounting my project by 90% here. And so I don't want to tell them that I'll reach $1 billion. I got to lie to them, because they're only going to invest in me if I have $1 billion in their minds. So what I need to do is I need to fudge my numbers to be 10 billion. And then the investor will multiply it by 10% and then wind up at 1 billion, and then they'll invest. And like that's what I feel constantly happens here. It's just a question of, well, we'll just broaden the target market until it's absurdly large. And everybody knows that they're lying to each other, but we still kind of play out this charade. Does that make sense?
It does. Is there a way to get out of that charade?
Yes. My workshop where I do cash flow projections, I ask people to have an assumptions page where they color the assumptions based on how certain they are about it, whether they measured it or whether they got it from a global report by McKinstry or whether they picked it out of the orifice somewhere. And then you can see whether they've measured the data or not. And then when their assumption page is all red, then you say this is full of it. When their assumption page is mostly green with a few yellows, then you know they've got a real business.
Assuming so John, that's kind of what we're talking about here. So go ahead.
Oh, John, that's assumed that they haven't diluted themselves in terms of the, do they have evidence behind those assumptions? It may be
that's
green.
The point. They color the background of those assumptions based on their measurement, whether they've measured it.
No, I think what Norris is saying is that they might color them in their minds with a very rosy set of glasses.
Oh,
and
that's not a measurement.
Well, John, is in the old days of these, the massive business plans and the multiple projections, that the entrepreneur might find 3 different market projections for the industry growth, and one would be very strong, would be very weak, and one very confused in the middle, and they always are going to pick the rosiest assumption. Is
right, but never would a market projection be green in my book.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I love
there
John.
You go. So now you're back in the steeplechase, right? This is what I feel is absolutely the problem. I think you can do, and people are doing what you were talking about, John, where like you might color code the sticky notes or whatever they are, like green, orange, red. I think I'm sorry, I can't see the name. Caitlin? Is it Caitlin?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
I think to Caitlin's point there is that I am not super interested in pitching to investors. So I have to say I'm more slanted towards giving the entrepreneurs a decent picture of their own projections. And then if those entrepreneurs can get together with the investor and decide, no, let's talk reality, I'm all for that. I think investors and entrepreneurs can speak in this same language and communicate better. But I have to be honest there and say that, like, would I show one of these types of projections to an investor? No, I'd show them exactly what they want to do because I want their money, right? So I'll show them whatever I need to show them to get their cash. That's just me being realistic. Okay? So what I would like to do kind of for the rest of this workshop is talk about an approach to go from sticky notes all the way to what I would call a hurricane graph via storyboarding, visual financial modeling, actual hypothesis-driven financial modeling, and then applying a little bit of statistics, which will make Peter very happy, I know. Talk about Monte Carlo analysis if we can get there, and how to kind of bridge that gap between the sticky note to a financial projection that is based on uncertainty. Is that okay with everybody? Give me like a thumbs up, thumbs down, yes, no, on target. All right, looks pretty good. So Peter's giving me 2 thumbs up, so he's very excited. Okay, this is a topic. So some of you and I go way back, and Peter and I talk about this topic quite a lot. So you'll have to pardon me if I nudge him with my elbow every once in a while. Okay. And John's saying sensitivity process. Yes, we'll talk about sensitivity analysis later. Okay, so storyboarding. So one of the things that I think is very important, again, whether it's a corporate team or a startup team or a nonprofit, it's all the same. Is once you've got entrepreneurs together, they've been really told at this point to avoid talking about ROI at all costs. Like, don't do it. Talk about qualitative data. Focus on that. And that's absolutely fine. But the first step is to go from kind of this fuzzy qualitative data to something that you can measure and start making assumptions on. Otherwise, you're never going to get to a dollar figure. So we start that with storyboarding. Now, storyboarding, or some of you may be more familiar with user journey mapping, is a relatively simple process. It's the same storyboards that you might have seen in like a Pixar documentary. It is literally drawing out what happens from scene to scene when a user goes from downloading your app, signing up for an account, or even just walking into your store, to browsing the shelves, to picking some awesome box of Ritz crackers up, throwing it in their cart, pushing it over to the checkout counter, and getting out. This, for example, is a ridiculous storyboard based on Instagram, where we see something awesome, take a photo of it. It's a terrible photo. We go to the magic Instagram filter window and ask them to fix it for us. It looks great, and all of a sudden you're super, super famous. That's the story of Instagram. Now, this is something that entrepreneurs have no problem with. If you ask them for financial projection, they're going to balk. But if you ask them for this, it's something that they have to do. It's in fact something that's a very good project management technique, and it's kind of a critical ingredient of building their products. So most of them are doing this anyway. And if you've never seen this before, but you've heard the word user storyboarding, that is basically the same thing, except using words instead of drawings. Personally, I prefer drawings, but words are fine too, as long as the words also include some sort of representation of happiness, sadness, something to understand what the user is going through in that moment. Okay, so from there, what we can do with something just as simple as a storyboard is we can start asking ourselves, even the designer on the team who's very numbers averse, we can start asking them, hey, what happens in each of these scenes that you've drawn? Like, what are the things that we can count here? Well, I can count, again, this is a somewhat exaggerated example, but I can count the number of trips somebody has taken recently. I can also count the number of great vistas they've seen in the world. I can count the number of pictures they've taken, the number of 5-star pictures they've taken, the number of filters they've applied, all these things that kind of happen individually in this scene. Again, I'm not going to make you walk through this process. This workshop is relatively short, so we're not going to go through end to end, but I want to make sure that I emphasize that this is something which entrepreneurs do not have much of an issue with, and is a pretty short and simple step for them. Now from there, it's relatively easy to go from what some of you may call a vanity metric to something that is more of an actionable metric, meaning what is the conversion rate from step to step? Can we measure the percentage of people who feel that the filters have genuinely improved their pictures? Can we measure the number of people that, the percentage of people that save the pictures after the filter has been applied or share them? Can we measure the percentage of people of users that are signed up? These are very good things to measure. Their actionable metrics, and they tell us what is the average percentage of people that are actually moving through the desired story that we have designed for them, and actually gotten to the end where they are super happy and look awesome and are famous. So far, so good? Okay. So we want to keep this story simple, but not too simple. So I'm going to be using, probably for the rest of the day, the example of just running a restaurant or a food truck. I just want a very, very basic story that explains how a person comes into my store or passes by my restaurant, sees the menu, and then sits down, orders, and actually gives me money. That is the story I need to understand, from acquisition to revenue. And in the storyboarding sense, I'll just make the story extremely simple. I've got visitors. That could be the number of people who check out my menu when they walk past. I've got customers. This is the number of customers who actually sit down and order something. And I have revenue, perhaps the dollars that come in through the day and actually get paid by customers. And I can convert those into basic conversion funnels. So number of people who order divided by the number of people who read the menu, well, that is the number for acquisition. The dollars per customer that are actually paid, the average amount paid per customer, that would be a measure of revenue. So far, so good? Or sorry, actually, that first number would be activation, not acquisition. The very first number of people who walk by the street, that would be acquisition. So far, so good? A super simple one, in case you don't recognize it. I am basing this basically off, oh yes, engagement metrics, I see somebody said. Yeah, I'm basing this loosely off of the famous startup metrics for pirates, acquisition, activation, retention, and referral, also abbreviated as R. So We can take a simple model like this. Oh, thank you very much, John. John is closed captioning this entire presentation. We can take something simple like this and we can convert it into a visual model, because this storyboard, it is lacking certain things that are hard to visualize with a stack of Post-it notes. So what I like to do is, if I can get the startup, in this case, to get their storyboard down on paper and explain the user experience to me, even on day 0, their hypothesis of the user experience, that'll take sometimes 1 hour, sometimes 2 hours. I can then take the next step and get them to visualize a model, because this sort of funnel, this sort of storyboard is basically just a funnel, right? It's just, you know, how much time passes, how many visitors do you get, how many visitors per day walk past the restaurant, what percentage of people become customers, and then how much money do they give you. So the thing that's missing from the storyboard that's a little bit easier to visualize like this is, of course, something very important, like, do they return? Like, how does my model, how does the system work? How do we get customers coming back to the store, or am I just relying on foot traffic every day to provide me customers? Of course, what I'd like is that my food is fantastic. I make a decent spaghetti bolognese, so I hope that they're going to come back every day. And I hope more than that, that some of them will actually refer their friends. So these can be represented in terms of loops. I got a funnel where each step represents friction in my process. If there's very high friction, I'll see a lot of drop-offs. A lot of people are going to read my menu and then just walk on past because they're not in the mood for spaghetti bolognese. And some of them are going to go through the funnel. But there's only going to be friction through the funnel. But retention is going to be a number from 0 to 100%. Some of those people are going to come back, and then some of those people are going to invite their friends. So that's what I mean by a visual model. And this visual model, it could be that customers refer visitors. It could be something more freemium based. Like, you all remember Facebook, where you visited the site and you immediately, before you even used the product, you started inviting your friends. That's another form of a viral loop. You could have multiple return loops for free users versus paid users. There's a lot of different things you can do in terms of visually modeling out what is the system that you're operating under. How does your business model actually function in terms of converting users into paying customers in dollars? Okay, so not as many steps as you want, all that, but for now, I'm just going to keep it simple. We're just going to use this acquisition, activation, retention, and referral. Make sense so far? I know I'm going relatively fast, and I'm speaking fast because I had a lot of caffeine. All good?
Looks good to me.
Great. And John, please keep on telling me if a lot of stuff's coming up in the chat. Let me know.
Yep. Everyone's quiet.
A little bit of 2 screens going there.
Yep.
Well, it's either good, very good, or very bad. You never quite know until later.
Yep.
All right. So all that entire process is something that most startups can do in anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. It's not such a big deal. They don't feel paranoid. They don't feel like they're getting held to a target immediately. This is just something they have to do anyway. They have to do this type of process and understand what to build. Now, the trick now is to start quantifying this model. And that does mean moving to a spreadsheet. So I am going to ask you to go into some breakout rooms at some point and help me with some spreadsheet stuff, but please do not worry. It will not be a spreadsheet like this. You do not need to panic in any way. In fact, all the math in this is going to be limited to addition, subtraction, multiplication, and you're not going to have to do any of the math. The spreadsheet's going to do the math. So all I'm really going to ask you to do is change values in a certain box, and you'll start seeing what I mean. So in a few minutes, I'm going to show you some, actually, let me no tensor calculus. Well, Norris is on fire today. No, there will be no tensor calculus. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to give you some links in the chat room. Links should be relatively obvious to use, I hope. When we go into breakout rooms, I'm going to ask you to look and say, what room am I in? And then all I want you to do is go in your browser to chromatic.com/room and then the number, and hopefully everybody in your room will wind up on the right spreadsheet. But please check on the room numbers. hopefully you got those links. If not, John, please let me know and I'll try and repaste them.
Yep, they look good.
Just to check, look good, still online, great, good. So, whoops, now I know my internet went out, but I can still hear John, I think.
Yep, we're doing good.
Okay, John, actually, do me a favor, and while my internet reconnects, please go to that first link, and I want you to share your screen and show everybody your screen and show everybody that spreadsheet.
All right, working on it. Yep, hold on.
Great. So what we're going to do in this spreadsheet is we've basically just taken that visual model and I've coded it into a spreadsheet here. And once John has it up, what you're going to see is that there are no raw numbers that are pasted into 2033 and things like that. We're not asking somebody to guess what happens in 2024. What we're doing is we're asking somebody to guess at what their conversion metrics are, what their actual actionable metrics will be. Like what percentage of people who read your menu will be so excited that they're going to be willing to sit down and order something. That's it. Like that, those are the numbers that we're asking people to guess. We're not asking somebody to guess, you know, including compounding growth, what's going to happen. We're asking somebody to guess simply what percentage of people who read your menu will actually convert.
And Guy is asking the question of how does this fit in B2B versus B2C?
Oh, it's basically just different numbers. B2B, you still have conversion rates. It is a lot more complicated to model, especially when we get to Monte Carlo analysis. It becomes very, very tricky. I know this because I do B2B sales processes, and the funnels do not behave in a, let's just say the curves aren't normalized. It's not a standard distribution. You get some really wacky, chunky distribution curves that can be a little bit tricky. But ask me that question again when we get to Monte Carlo analysis, but it's something you can do. It just gets a little bit more complicated and trickier. But there are ways to simplify it for the first step. Now, John, you're still showing your screen or no?
I just turned it off. You want me to put it back up?
Oh, you just turned it off. Oh, that's it. Well, sure. Why not? Probably safer than me doing it. Now, on this screen, on this spreadsheet that John is going to show in a second, okay, go to these. On the first tab, you're going to find basically the instructions for the breakout room. It's just a bunch of questions and instructions. And I'm going to want you to do those three things. I'm going to ask you to change variables to figure out how to make this business model have no growth, how to make it have limited growth, and how to have it have exponential growth. And I'm going to give you some discussion questions, which I want, ideally, for you to be able to answer or at least guess at. But if you go to tab 2, that's where we're going to do the work here. Now, click on that, John. Yes, fantastic. Thank you. Now, all you're going to see on the spreadsheet is if you click on, let's say, column Q, row 20, John, you're going to see the number 1,000. And I want you to see that in the formula, yes, exactly, in that row, if you just click on any of the numbers in that row, you're going to see that there's actually no number hard-coded in there. It's a formula, meaning it's just based on the variables that are on the top left in blue. And John, if you go to column D and row 2, or row 3, you'll see that we've got 1,000 visitors per month. That's my assumption. I've got 1,000 people reading my menu. Nope, don't change that. Whatever you do, don't change that. You're going to break it. Right. But if you go to row D, column row 2, like the blue boxes up there, that's where you can type the numbers. So if you go up there and just start changing the numbers, what you should see is that the curve on the left, which represents the results, represents the revenue, is going to start changing. Can you see that, John?
Yep.
Awesome. It's changing. You're changing some numbers. Now, you can change any of those numbers that you want when they're in those breakout rooms. That is the only thing you're allowed to do. If you really feel adventurous, you can change other things, but I make no guarantees as to whether or not you'll be able to answer any of the other questions in there if you start messing with the formulas. But There are some tools that'll do this in a more simple fashion, but I'm using a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet, just because it's a little bit more accessible for everybody, and you can kind of dig in if you want to just understand the very, very basic logic here. The other thing I want to point out before we get into the breakout rooms is that even this is very, very simple for entrepreneurs. I can generally take a group of entrepreneurs, even ones that are not super comfortable with a spreadsheet. We can give them a basic template or even go from a blank spreadsheet and get them to model out the very basic hypotheses that they have. Oh, nice one, John. Now, yeah, I got them losing money. But you can get them to model out something like this in a little bit more than an hour. An hour and a half is a little bit safer. And it's, again, very, very straightforward, even on day 0, because this is all hypotheses right now. The blue boxes are hypotheses. Okay. Kimberly is saying she has to go. Watch the recording later, because we haven't gotten to the cool part of this, because it's Monte Carlo analysis. Anyway, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to say, you're the entrepreneurs. We've gotten you to this point. You have this spreadsheet. And what I want you to do is answer some questions for yourself. How are we going to make this unbelievably scalable food truck for some reason? I don't know why it's quite so scalable, but imagine that it's an extremely scalable food truck. And I want you to figure out those 3 questions. What would make our growth completely flat? That should be easy. Okay? What would just make it a flat line going across that graph? Then, what would give me limited growth? So the place you're starting with now actually is limited growth. Like it's a curve that it seems to plateau. So if you see something like that, that's limited growth. And why? Why is it limited? Why isn't it just going up and to the right? And then lastly, what numbers do I have to change in order to get this to be exponential growth? If I'm your investor and I say that I want to see you making 15 million a month with your really impressive food truck, how are you going to get to that number? What are the things that have to happen? What are the hypotheses that must be true for you to get exponential growth? All right. So, John, let's put us into breakout rooms. There are a maximum of 10 breakout rooms, please. Please don't do more than that. You can put people into random rooms. Those of you with like Peter in the room are going to be super excited because he's an expert on this stuff. I secretly suspect Ryan and Guy are, I know Ryan is a spreadsheet whiz, so you're going to have some distinct advantages in some of these rooms. But it's pretty straightforward. Just play with the numbers. Don't worry about the formulas and do trial and error to see if you as an entrepreneur can understand what hypotheses must be true for us to get exponential or limited growth. Okay, let's go into those breakouts.
Everybody getting to the place they want to get to?
Can I get re-invited into the room, please?
So sorry, say who that was.
This is Andy here talking.
Right. You should be, I see, I have to go hunting for which room you're in. Andy, there you are. It says you're in room 9. Are you not in there? Oh, I know it's wrong. You are here both as a person and as an audio, right?
Are you talking to me?
To Andy. Andy just
sorry.
put it up. So are you
Thank you.
going
Yeah, I
into
just got in.
room 2, Norris?
I've got to step away. I've got a call coming in. I'll be back in 5 or 10 minutes. So
All right.
I missed this part, but I am loving this. Great job, guys.
Yeah. Doing all right. Steve's iPhone, are you getting to the right place? Mark, are you getting to the right place? How about you, Ken? Elham, sorry, Elham. You getting in the right room? Yasmin, how about you? And now we see all the people that stepped away.
Okay. Have you placed like a dial-in number that might be like 415 or something like that in the breakout room? I think I'm assigned to breakout room 3 with my phone.
When I hit I just hit the go automatically thing.
That's good. Can you try making me a host again? A co-host? I've lost our connection.
There you go. I was trying to find your.
I'm in room 10 is my.
Is where your audio wandered off to. There you go.
Check.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, now I'm back. I think given the technical difficulties I have,
Oops, what? No, I lost you again. You're on mute. So your audio is not being audio. Yeah. No, I just heard you. Heard you. Yes. No, I'm hearing me. Echo. Can't hear you, no. Nope. I just heard something. I don't know why I'm getting an echo. Lost your video. Have your audio.
Test, John, can you hear me? Oh, what?
No, there you are.
Great, I think I got you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, that worked. Your video is still missing, but
yeah, it's probably gonna come on and off. So fortunately, only my connection is still good. How long did we give them so far? I'd like to give them about 15 minutes, but ideally, if you can pop into a breakout room and see how far they are, I think that would be ideal. How long has it been so far?
Just 4 minutes.
4 minutes? Okay. Let's give them until 5, and then if you can broadcast a message that say you should be looking at limited growth by now, I think that would be good. And ideally, if you can pop into a couple rooms and check out how far people are, we don't want to let them. 15 minutes is a good chunk of time. If people get done before that, we can end the breakout rooms early.
Right. So you should be at the limited growth scenario.
Oh yeah, looks like I still have control. Great.
And I'll go join Room 8 and see what they're up to.
Great. Thanks very much, John.
Hi, Annie.
Hey, sorry, I'm late.
Everybody's off in breakout rooms. Let me see if I can assign you to one real quick.
What is the assignment in the breakout rooms?
There's a spreadsheet that you're manipulating to make it go well or go badly.
It's easier to make it go badly, Annie.
Strangely enough. This is actually the demonstration that I'm having problems getting a name. Tim Barry uses for his, what is the name of his product? Palo Alto Software has Live Plan Pro. They do business planning. And he pops up a little window and he has a little slidey bar. And he says, here's a perfectly good, profitable business. Watch this. And, you know, he changes 2 slidey bars and they're dead in 2 months, right? And so, you know,
that's life.
Watching some core things like the amount of time it takes your customers to pay you affects your cash flow, which then affects whether or not you're alive or not. Yep.
That is absolutely true. I've had that experience.
Yeah.
Has it been about 10 minutes so far?
We're at, yeah, we're another 2 minutes and we'll be at 10 minutes. Some of the groups are sharing screens and having one person do the work and they're discussing, and some people each have individual screens and are just talking to each other and everyone's playing with the numbers. So very different angles for how they're approaching it. Room 10 looks like it's empty.
Yeah, that was the one I was in.
Yeah. Couple have 5 people in them. Most have 4. Couple people have left. They're down a little bit. I think that some people think that conversations are going to be an hour. When they do that, then they don't account for the mush at the beginning. So we're at 10 minutes at this point. You want me to send a 5-minute warning, Mark?
Yeah, I've got it. Got it here.
You know, how you join a Zoom room affects whether or not your phone is connected to your picture. And so
Yes, I know.
type in your
I was connected, but it's dropping on and off, so I'm not going to touch it at this point.
All right. I didn't see a broadcast go out. Did you send it?
I did.
Hey, Hood. Haven't seen you for a while.
Yes, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. So let me assign you guys. There's 5 more minutes to the project, so.
Oh, we're done, so don't assign us back, please.
Oh, great. Good. All right.
Hi,
Let's see who
Adi.
else is done, and maybe we'll end them early.
Alisa said that she sent you a note in your chat. Did you see that?
I did get it. I'm gonna follow it up. Thank you.
Okay, good. So what room were you in before?
I was in 7 with the hood.
Cool.
So we did the formulas and got our exponentials and flats.
And what did you determine was the variable that could help you to get exponential?
The referrer visitor number. When we played that, we saw that that was changing the from flat to linear to exponential the most.
And why wouldn't retention get you there?
Because retention doesn't cause growth. Refer a visitor is the one that gets you new people.
Retention does cause growth, but a certain type of growth.
Yeah, the refer a visitor one, that is the one that increases your total visitors the most. Right?
It can get you to a higher level. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, that's
retention
what we figured.
Can cause growth.
Correct.
It just causes you limited growth generally, unless it's 100%, in which case then you get linear growth.
Okay. Yes, you're right. That's how we're.
We did good. Perfect. Easy peasy, right?
Easy, yeah, right. Greenland.
Greenland.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe that's the tip of Greenland. I don't know. Could be.
So
okay.
2 more.
Are
2
we?
more minutes.
I think we're about done. 2 more minutes.
Yeah. Or whatever you want. We're at the 2-minute mark.
The one question before we go back is, Tristan, maybe, or John, is this is the level of stuff you really don't see much in diligence. So you're saying ask for this kind of things, right?
Oh no, this is.
I mean, this is
exactly what you
basic to me.
This is stuff you should see in the. Okay, we've decided that you're a company we want to invest in now. Are you doing this or not?
Right.
If they don't have a clue about this conversation,
then you walk. Yeah.
Then you got to go back to remedial work.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Because some people resist, like this information, this level of information.
So I'm going to close the rooms now, and it'll take a minute for them to come back.
Sounds good.
Now, Izzy, one of the things that's important about angels that's different than venture capital is that angels will take on companies that are resistant to this and work with them and see if they learn or not. And so this is part of a training process where the ones that love the business model will help people get to the point where they understand it. But if your investor if your CEO does not understand those critical turning points, they're in trouble.
Got it. Thanks.
They're skiing blindly. I like to say skiing blindfolded down a slope with trees.
What can go wrong?
fiddle with your cost of goods that much.
There you go, Alicia.
Oh, cost of goods. Yeah.
So we're all back.
That was fun.
Yeah. You too can be a fractional CFO.
How do we get our hands on that Excel spreadsheet?
Well, you have the link.
Oh, that's very simple. That link will work for a while, but I'll also give you a link to another template you can have. But this is
Or
a
you
very
can
basic
go to
template.
File and save a copy.
That'll work too. But then I won't get your email. Stop cheating me of those emails.
Ah, squash the funnel. One fell swoop.
There we go. So
this is a simple spreadsheet. You're welcome to it.
People have asked for the slide deck and recordings. We are doing a recording, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel, and I put the YouTube channel into the chat, and so you should be able to save it.
Clearly being too casual for a YouTube channel.
No, this is normal at this point.
Okay, are we all back?
Yep, all back.
Okay, how much time do we have, John?
I got 45 minutes left in my time for you. You can do what you like with it.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so do we still have Peter on the phone?
Peter LaPlante.
The phone. Yep, he's on the phone.
Peter, awesome. Oh, you're not on the screen anymore. Okay, too bad.
I'm not. I am.
Do something.
Oh, yes.
Oh, you are. Okay, great. So I just sent you a link, Peter. In case my screen goes down, I've added you to that with your Be in Unison email address, and I'd appreciate if you can share your screen and help me out in case my connection goes down. Okay, because I know you're very familiar with the spreadsheet. Is that all right with you, Peter?
Yes. Let me get it up and going first.
Okay. Awesome, fantastic. We don't need it right this second, but that would be super, super helpful. And don't worry, everybody, we'll share all of the templates that I'm using now in the slide deck, and we'll share all of those things. Now I'm just going to grab room number 1 here. Most of you have figured out, room number 1 managed to get linear growth. So you've got to really hit it spot on to get linear growth in this case. I think you've all done very well from what I understand. I've only heard from just a couple of the rooms, but I understand that you were all relatively able to find what are the key levers in order to get limited growth and what are the key levers to get exponential growth. And if you don't mind, just type into the chat window, what is the one metric that you could change that would actually get you to exponential growth? Is that key metric there? And John, maybe you can read them out since my chat window is all over the place here.
Referrals,
retention and referrals.
Yep.
That's also correct. Yes, there are multiple ways to get to exponential growth, and it is in fact much easier to do when you have some retention and referrals. But the important thing I think that everybody figured out is that you cannot get to exponential growth with only retention. It is not possible. You can get growth and very decent growth, and you can get a business that works, but at least with this financial model specifically, if you had a startup, say, that came to you and said, our key metric is retention, and we're going to get to $10 million a month by focusing on retention and having the highest retention in the industry, you would be right to call BS, right? Because it ain't happening.
So Tristan, what about recurring revenue models where you're increasing your new customer acquisition?
Sure, that is a different model, but it will still actually be limited growth. Actually, what you're doing in that case is, let me see if I can hack this to show you. Y'all can still see my screen, right?
Yep.
So what's actually happening if you do what you were discussing, I don't know if I'm going to be able to correctly do this or not, but I'm going to just try and annotate on it. Can I draw on this? Yay, okay. So what you're actually doing then is you're taking your money and you're piling it back into acquisition. Right? You're increasing the total people going into the top of the funnel. What that does do is it actually, if you model that out, what's going to happen is it's going to behave very similarly to retention. You will grow. If you do that plus returning customers, you can get some level of unlimited growth. but it is a step function that is very similar to returning customers. It will not do what referral will do for you. And the only reason is because there's no limit to referrals. Right? You can have a number of one person invites 100 of their friends. Like that's the only reason. Right? I'm not saying referral is easier than retention. It's just how the math works.
Neil was saying he was confused because they got to referral and retention even when their costs were higher than revenue.
Oh, yes, you can absolutely do that, right? Because and this is something that happens, right? Like this is a startup phenomenon. If you have costs that are higher than your actual cost, if you have costs that are higher than your revenue per customer, what you have is like Twitter in the early days, right? Where they weren't making any money. They didn't have a solid revenue plan. And you have to figure out how to get your revenue above there. And you can still grow. You can, in fact, still grow your user base exponentially, but you're just incurring exponentially more costs and you're losing more and more and more money. In fact, a lot of companies, if you model out social networks like that, and you don't account for decisions in that tree to like say, hey, stop acquiring customers, stop letting people in, you're going to just find yourself losing more and more money. So that's spot on, Neil.
But that means the chart's really just showing growth, not profit.
Yes, I mean.
Okay, that's what we missed. We were looking saying, yeah, we were showing the growth, but we're going like, but if it's losing, we thought that was the chart also is trying to demonstrate profit and loss, and that's the wrong way to. It's just a growth chart.
Unless I screwed up the connection, it should have been showing you profit and loss, but it's possible I screwed something up there. But just remember, there are 3 cost boxes there. It's possible you made the cost higher in terms of retention and referral, and not in terms of the cost of goods sold. So that might have been what you were seeing there. Yeah. And I'll try and I don't know if I can get rid of what I wrote here.
We were just trying to see if we could get it. I was trying to see.
Oh, you can break it.
You'll see the curve invert when we increased our cost of activation, right, so that our combined total of all our costs was higher. We got the inverted amplitude.
Right, here's a nice high retention referral, and you can see I've gone exponential in the wrong direction here. And so that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the thing I want to emphasize here, I don't know what I just did. Oh, there we go. The thing I want to emphasize here is that this is not complex math. Right? Like this is very, very basic. And it should be possible to get an entrepreneur to this state in less than half a day. This is also not something which you're meant to kind of hold their feet to the fire, but what it has, what a basic financial model, one where you just put the numbers in 2023 does not have, is it is hypothesis driven. And by making it hypothesis driven, the key thing that it helps us as early stage investors do is it helps us set targets for actual testing that we can do this month. Right? Because in this model, this entrepreneur is claiming that they're going to get an activation rate of 50%, and they're going to get a retention rate of 50%, and every customer that comes to them is going to refer another customer. And I can test those numbers on day 1. Even if they only have 1 customer, if that customer does not invite 1 more customer that signs up, well, then I know that one of these hypotheses is incorrect. Testability is one of the key features that I want to get out here. And this is, again, just the basic one. We're not even at the Monte Carlo simulation yet, but this is the basic function. What I want is something that's truthful, right? That entrepreneurs can put their genuine hypotheses in, and that are testable, right? So that we can figure out if those guesses are correct. And the side benefit then again is that you can set benchmarks for the numbers I need to hit in order for my overall growth model to be correct. Okay, user versus customer. I see a couple of questions here. Michelle is asking what's the difference between cost of acquisition and cost of activation. In this particular model, I'm just putting a cost of acquisition, which essentially just refers to I'm putting a flyer outside my store, or there's a guy with a spinny thing, and I've offered to pay that person with a spinny thing, in this case, $1 for every user that they bring in. right? So that's the cost of handing out flyers, and when somebody reads those flyers, 50% of them will come into my store in this case. So it's just a cost I've assigned to the loop at various, or sorry, to the funnel at various different stages. I could also assign a cost to referral or revenue or retention. I can assign costs to various parts of that. Again, relatively easy math. It's a spreadsheet that would be fairly simple to
I think that what Michelle is asking is to understand what the difference between acquisition and activation is. You know, at what point does activation turn into being a customer versus being a participant?
So the definitions of some of these terms, I have to tell you, is a little bit arbitrary, but the common definition of acquisition is that somebody has not paid for your product at some point. They're at the point where they can decide whether or not to use your product or not. Now, if you have a freemium product versus a paid product, there are going to be some kind of wiggly definitions if they consider acquisition like free and using your product, but not up to the point where they've upgraded to premium. But generally, most people mean by acquisition that they got somebody to the store or the website and they've seen the value of your product and they're trying to decide whether to go on. And activation, again, in general, people will define this differently. So you have to ask the startup what they mean by that. But I really enjoy the fact that Elizabeth is calling me out for talking too fast, I think. My apologies. I'll try and slow down. It is the New York vibe is getting to me here. The activation rate is generally going to be, for me, the percentage of people who go from acquisition, from being a visitor, to actually purchasing your product in some way. Or if it's a free product, such as Twitter, it'll be the percentage of people that will convert to a moment of happiness and become a long-term user. Retention rate is the actual percentage of people that become a long-term user, but activation, at least in the case of Twitter, would be the percentage of people who go from getting to the website to not only logging in and signing up, but to following at least 17 other people, I think is the metric that they used to use.
So the example of your food truck, this would be the difference between somebody stopping by and looking at the menu versus somebody who actually places an order?
Yep. Spot on. That is exactly it.
In that
so you have to
Twitter
define
example,
those numbers for yourself.
Hey, Kristen, in your Twitter example, the cost where the cost is higher than the revenue, if an entrepreneur comes to you and says,
now they make money.
Yeah, it used to be. So in that initial stages, if an entrepreneur comes to you and says, hey, I'm spending a lot of money to run my business, but I will be profitable 5 years from now and I'll make billions of dollars. Is there a number that you look at in their financial model that would indicate to you that yes, that is possible, or no, that is not possible?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you can do, right? Like, so even with a basic model like this, first of all, as an investor, you can make a choice. You can say, you know what, I don't care about revenue. As long as you can prove to me that you can grow user base, then I feel confident enough that somehow you'll figure out how to make money, right? That's one option. In which case, now you can really restrict the model that you're creating to just user growth. And I'm just not going to worry about monetization right now. And that would not be entirely unreasonable in the case of social media apps or games, right? Like, there's ways, it's a solvable problem. It's not the area you consider the most risky in the business. On the other hand, you could say that, hey, look, I understand that you don't know exactly how you're going to make money today, or you don't know exactly the model by which you'll make money, but I would like to know that you at least have a hypothesis. That you have a hypothesis that the model you're going to go after is advertising, and you believe that you can get anywhere from $1 to $10 in advertising per user over the lifetime of that user, or the monthly value of that user, right? So they should at least be able to give you a hypothesis. And if they can't, that to me is a little bit of a warning sign, or it's a sign that they don't trust you and they don't want to talk about it. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's helpful. Thank you.
So I'm going a little bit back and forth between the chats. So again, please, somebody stop me if I miss a chat, but I'll keep on going here. Okay, so far we went from sticky notes and we went all the way to a hypothesis-driven financial model, which allows us to set some targets that are testable. And the next thing I want to do is go from something which for me, this is a really basic financial model right now, right? This is not complex. Do it in half a day or less, all the way from sticky notes. And I want to talk about that hurricane chart, right? Because that's where we want to go. We would really like to have something which represents uncertainty in this model. And right now, there isn't anything, right? It's extremely precise, this model. This model is extremely specific that in, what is this, December 2024, we're going to make $106,000, $106 and $500 that month. So that is extremely specific, and it's almost certainly wrong. You know, I'd be excited if we got above that number, but it's almost certain that we're not going to hit exactly that number. And that precision is actually hurting us in this case. Right? So it's that precision of prediction which guarantees that you'll be wrong, but also forces entrepreneurs to give these crazy, crazy billion-dollar numbers because you're asking them to tell you the exact number that you can hit. So instead, what we'd like to have is something like this sheet. And I see, Peter, you're in it. Great. If I drop off or my screen sharing drops off, please hit that sheet and start sharing your screen, and I'll just go from what you're doing. And of course, please unmute yourself and tell me that that happened if we reach that state. All right, so you can all see my screen now. Just give me a thumbs up if you can.
Yep.
Okay, great. So the only difference between this sheet and the other one in terms of inputs is that I am now asking the entrepreneur in this case for a best case scenario, and I'm asking them for a worst case scenario. And there are specific definitions of what I mean by best case and worst case. If you're a little bit more of a math geek, like Peter and myself, I'm asking them to be 95% confident here. I'm asking you to be 95% confident here. But for the purposes of this call, I'm just asking like, hey, look, give me the number where you think it's extremely unlikely you're going to have more than 1,000 people walking past your food truck each day, or each month in this case, I don't know, each month, let's say. And then give me the number where you think it's extremely unlikely that you're going to have less than 500 people walking past your food truck. Like you feel pretty confident that somewhere between 1,000 people and somewhere between 500 people, that's going to be the true number. Now, why are we doing that? We're doing that for a couple of reasons, because number one, now we are allowing the entrepreneur to be a little bit fuzzier. We're actually allowing them in some cases to be wrong, because I'm not asking for precision here. I'm really asking for the dream scenario that they think they can get to, and the worst case scenario, which is like, hey, look, it's possible that we might only get to this point. And what it allows us to do is, instead of having that one line on my chart, it actually allows us to construct this hurricane graph. And that's this little guy down here. And let me blow it up for you because this is a little bit small. Can you all see that now?
Yes.
No? Great, thank you. So this chart has a few different lines on it. And I want to point out something very important. And yes, Steve, I do see your comment. We will share these links. You can download them from my website if you go to chromatic.com. They're free, feel free. But we'll share them later via John. Now, this top line is exactly the same as the previous chart, which I will reset here. It's exactly the same shape, goes up to 40,000. I think I use the same numbers, like that's a little bit off, but same shape. Now the bottom line is the worst case scenario. And this black line here, the middle, is what I would consider the basic business case. And this is the dangerous one.
Switch back to the hurricane graph.
Pardon me?
You need to switch back to the hurricane graph.
I did mean, which means my internet is lagging. So Peter, if you can share your screen instead of me sharing mine, it might be a good time to do that. And show us the tab that says chart-hurricane.
Oh, I can't while you're sharing, it says.
Oops, well, I'm logged off, so we'll see it in a moment whenever that becomes feasible.
I just made you the co-host.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sean.
I'm doing it now.
And I applaud you all for sticking with the technical difficulties. So the thing
Where do you want me
the
to be?
basic business case, go to the chart-hurricane, please, tab. It's like 5 or 6 on the right.
Yeah, I'm there.
And so the thing with that black line in the middle is this is actually something that happens more commonly in large corporations, but I've also seen some entrepreneurs do it, and it's kind of scary, is they basically just take the best case scenario and they take the worst case scenario and they add them together and they divide by 2. And that's what that line means. And that is what I think the only word for that is really bad math. That is the word for it. That is not the way math works. You cannot just add the best and worst case and divide by 2 and expect for a realistic answer. That's going to give you a terrible, terrible estimation. Instead, what this scenario does, what's happening on all the tabs on this spreadsheet are doing, is they're basically taking your best case and worst case scenario for every single number that you've inputted for 1,000 customers to 500 customers, and it's rolling random dice. It's throwing random numbers at this problem and saying, if I just throw a lot of random numbers at this situation, what's going to happen? What are the outputs? It's assuming in this model that things behave in what we would consider a normal distribution, is the statistics term. It's assuming that things behave like most things in reality behave in this random distribution. And it's throwing all those dice. And Peter, can you go to like one of the Monte Carlo sheets just to show people what's happening with the numbers? Yeah, go to new visitors. Okay. It's throwing a lot of numbers at it, and you can see down below on row like 21 below, it says Monte Carlo. Those are all randomly generated numbers. And yes, Norris is saying forecasting research confirms that it's rarely linear. Yes, correct. And this method of kind of applying random numbers to a range that you've given is actually the same type of math that we use in predicting hurricanes. All just a Monte Carlo simulation. Just throwing random numbers within a prescribed distribution that looks, for those of you that remember, it looks like a bell curve in your statistics class, and we get this answer. Can you go back to the hurricane chart, please? And what it tells us in this case is that you can see the bounds of highly unlikely to highly unlikely to highly unlikely, but the kind of best case and worst case scenario via the Monte Carlo simulation, it is really unlikely. It's way outside of the bounds of likelihood that you're ever going to get to the best case scenario or that you're ever going to get to the worst case scenario. In fact, you're likely to be a little bit less than half of the basic business case. Right? Those are the bounds of reason. It's less than 5% likely that you're going to get between the best case and the top of that red line there. That is the reality of the projection that the entrepreneur has given you at this point. Now, does that mean you should never invest in this person or not? Maybe not. If you're willing to accept a less than 5% chance that this person is going to get to $30,000 a month, then you can feel free to invest in this one. But if you want more than a 5% chance that they're going to get above $10,000 a month in MRR, this projection, based on what the entrepreneur has told you here, is probably not a good bet. They have to do better. They have to go out and get you data that shows you their numbers are actually higher, a lot higher than they projected, even in the best case scenario. Okay, let me stop there for a second. how are we doing so far? So far, so good. Everybody understand kind of the point of this, or I don't want to get too deep into the math, but I want to make sure we understand like why this is important.
So can you speak to how early in a company's life using a Monte Carlo approach makes sense? Like how much data do you need before a normal distribution curve is practical?
Great. That's a wonderful question. Peter, what I'm going to ask you to do is I want you to go to the first tab, and I want you to put a wild range in terms of your referrals and a wild range in terms of your retention. Yeah, just put some really wide ranges in there so we can see kind of what extreme uncertainty looks like. Now, what I like most about using a Monte Carlo selection is that you can do it at any point and it always makes sense. And the reason it always makes sense is because uncertainty is represented in either the width of that hurricane chart and in the width of each variable. Oh, I think, Peter, your sheet is recalculating, or you picked some really key numbers there. Oh yeah,
I went nuts.
You went nuts. So Google Sheets is actually really slow at this, just so you all know. Excel is a far superior solution, but I opted for Google Sheets for shareability today. But you can see, stop changing the numbers. It's going to recalculate every time. Perfect. Keep it like that. So what Peter's doing is he's widening the ranges. And you can imagine for yourself that on day 0, the entrepreneurs should literally have no idea like what their acquisition rate should be. Right? They can think to themselves, oh, I don't know, it can be anywhere from 0% to 100%. And that even that would be a fair thing to say. It would be fair to say that on day 0, you have absolutely no idea what the rate is. I would personally argue that what you can do is you can say, well, look, based on benchmarks, an e-commerce company generally has somewhere between a 0% conversion rate and a 2% conversion rate. If this is a sign up to a free model, it's going to be something more like anywhere from 5% is good to 20% is great for a freemium product to sign up. So there are some benchmarks you can use, but even on day 0, you just represent the numbers in your hypothesis as extremely wide ranges with large degrees of uncertainty. So, sorry, does that make sense so far? There is some other stuff I want to say about this, but I want to make sure I'm on track.
Yeah, why don't you keep going? But I guess the point I'm making is when I've worked in large companies with previous history, the Monte Carlo analysis was more consistent with our experience. But when we're looking at a company that is pre-revenue or really has no idea if the product they're bringing to market is even going to be adopted by the market, then we're really looking at 0 as the bottom case.
Yes.
It may be of a little bit more limited value in terms of modeling. So I was just kind of wondering if you had a sweet spot in your perspective where it starts to really add value.
Well, what I like to think is that even on day 0, what it can tell you is even the basic one where it's just where we're not applying Monte Carlo, but the basic one can tell you like, look, is there any scenario that is vaguely realistic where I could get the level of growth I need? Like, it doesn't need to be exponential growth, but if your ambition, even if you're a small business owner, is like, I want to make $30,000 a month, is there any scenario that I could get to that number? And I think it's fair, although generally not necessary on like day 0. You can wait until day 10 or even month 3 to do this. You can start narrowing those ranges. The advantage to doing it in a Monte Carlo scenario is I'm going to ask you to go to the histogram tab, Peter, and then I'm going to ask you to put in some numbers. Let's play around with the numbers, and we can start playing around with the sensitivity. Even on day 0 again, what we can do is we can start saying, let's say my level of ambition for this product is 500,000. Let's put in 500,000 given the numbers you put in, Peter. And let's say that that I would like this business, maybe as an investor, to make at least 500,000. And Peter, let's say that I'm really not expecting a huge amount of certainty at this point from the entrepreneur. But what I would like to say is is I'd like to be, let's see, okay, let's see what this calculation comes out as. What I can say is I want to have some belief that you're at least 5% likely to reach $500,000 per month, or actually, sorry, total profit histogram in this case. If this was a tech company, you'd say I want to be at least 1% likely that you're going to reach $1 billion, okay, even with your very, very little information at the zero stage. And you could plug this into a Monte Carlo analysis, and it should tell you if you're at least 1% likely, or I said 5%, sorry, 5% likely to get that. And lo and behold, it does say likelihood of reaching target at my target of $500,000 profit within 4 years. It says I'm at least 11% likely to hit that, even with this high degree of uncertainty that I've given the model. Right, so that's an important start. Like, I don't have to expect them to be like 75% likely to hit my $1 billion target, but I'd like them to at least be 1% likely. And I can also say to myself, well, look, what's my expected loss in this scenario? This is not a question that angel investors will usually take, because your expected level of loss when you're betting like $10,000 to $50,000 is usually, I expect to lose all of my money. That's the default assumption. This is play money for me. But if you're a little bit more cautious and you say, like, I want to be at least 90% likely, like tell me the number that you're at least 90% likely to hit. And in this case, I'm pretty sure that there's a formula error in this case, because it's saying 775,000. So I'm pretty sure that's a formula error, but it can spit out a number that will say you are 90% likely to reach at least this minimum threshold. And so that's, to me, very powerful from an investor standpoint, because I don't just have to believe that there's some miraculous world where this company can actually reach $1 billion, but I can get a little bit more quantified about it. And then if you go to the sensitivity tab, Pete, you'll the other really, really nice thing from an entrepreneur's perspective. This, by the way, again, if you're familiar with stats, this is a very, very basic sensitivity analysis. It's not like a super, super clever one, but this is sometimes called a tornado chart. Aspen Labs called a tornado chart. But basically what I'm doing down there is I'm ranking the variables that have the most impact on the outcome. These are the variables that represent, the uncertainty here is coming from customers that return to become customers again, AKA retention. And we can kind of understand why that is. If you go back to the model, I bet that Pete put a huge range in there. Yeah, your retention is 80% to 20%. So it is having a massive, massive impact on the ultimate outcome of this model. So let's go to the hurricane chart briefly and see what's going on, Pete. Let's see where your chart looks like here. Oh yeah, so you've got this tremendous upside in Pete's model, right? When retention is high and referrals are high, you've got this exponential growth. But the most likely scenario, given the massive amount of uncertainty that Peter has put into this model, is it's almost flat. So this is, you really picked a social media application here, Pete. And let's go over to the again to the sensitivity.
This applies to a lot of different kinds of companies where this math has been done.
Oh yeah.
Sort of squint and they do bad math, and then we get this result, and then everybody says financial projections are crap. But in fact, if they had done the financial projection, they would have seen they were getting in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Pete, can you go? Oh, there you go. Can you go to the sensitivity analysis again? Or maybe my screen's lagging. Nope, I see you there. And we can see that there are a bunch of different variables there that are kind of stack ranked. So from an investor's perspective, again, I wouldn't generally expect a startup to tell the investors this level of information, but I would personally be thrilled if I had this level of information, because I would be very confident that the entrepreneurs are focused on the right thing. Because if I have this sensitivity analysis and I hear from the entrepreneurs that they are focused on growing referral right now, to be like, hey man, that's not the biggest difference here because you're getting new people into your product, but they ain't staying, right? Like, and I need some level of stickiness before referral is going to become really impactful. And I definitely don't want you worrying about the cost of goods sold right now because it's way down the chart in terms of priorities. And so that's what I really love here, is because you can start really getting quantitative prioritization, even though we are prioritizing with a high degree of uncertainty. Okay. So that's where I am, and I just recognized now that I am on camera, but my camera ain't linked to my voice. So you probably just see this little phone icon, and all this hand waving that I do as a New Yorker is just totally lost on everybody. That is where I want to get to. Now, I'm going to take back the screen sharing from you for a second, Peter. Let me see if I can do it. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but you know, we like to hope. Cross our fingers for this level of uncertainty. There we go. So what we've done now is we've gotten all the way to a Monte Carlo analysis. It is still, to me, useful at day 0 because it defines the bounds of whether or not your models work at all, or whether or not you should change the model on day 1 because you're never going to get there, or whether or not it seems like, okay, very risky, but still worth a shot. So we've gotten to that hurricane graph. Now, just to wrap up, and then I'll let you ask all the questions that you want. To me, this is bridging the gap from qualitative to quantitative, right? This is about taking those hypotheses and risky assumptions that you've laid out on sticky notes on your business model canvas and value proposition canvas, turning it into a storyboard, which is, again, something you've got to do anyway to build your product. You've got to understand what the user experience is going to be. Turning that into a visual model, which to me is just an interim step. It's just a simpler way of thinking for people who are scared of spreadsheets. And then taking that visual model and turning it into a very basic spreadsheet, which is already helping you a lot in terms of setting the floor, the threshold that you must cross in order to get to your growth ambition. And then applying a little bit more sophisticated math. This is not something I would generally let startups do by themselves, but there are getting more and more tools that are able to do this sort of thing without causing anybody a headache. And that is really going from this journey of business model canvas to storyboards to Monte Carlo analysis. So that is really where I want to go with all the startups that I work with, but also the corporations that I work with. And yes, I do see, as Caitlin was saying, I think she said she already does this, you can do this with corporations and actually improve their accuracy and prediction. Right? And so those are the key things I really want to get to. I want a model that is accurate, but not precise. It's accurate in terms of representing uncertainty. It is true, like the veracity is very high because I'm not forcing people to pick a number out of the hat and say like, this is the number that I should be held to. I'm giving them the ability to guess in ranges and express the level of uncertainty they have by increasing the range or shrinking it when they know more. And then finally, it's got to be testable. And all of these hypotheses are testable on day 1. So that's what I'm after. And the final beauty of this is that as you get additional information in, right, as you, oh, look, I can pin myself maybe. Did that actually focus it on me? I don't even know.
Only for you.
Spotlight for everyone. No, how about that? I don't know.
Nope, we get to see Norris instead.
Yeah. I got to see Norris. Well, Norris is a pretty handsome fella, so. Well, there we go. How about that? Now it's just me and Norris. Cool. I'll hang out with Norris.
Never be the smartest guy in the room or the better looking. So you got me beat on both today, Tristan.
You're muted. I'm sorry. Or something on your phone. There you go.
Now I'm unmuted. There we go. So sorry about that. Norris still has the best hat. Let's not deny that. Clearly superior to every single hat I own, which at this point amounts to baseball caps. Anyway, sorry. So the final thing I want to point out about this is that the lovely thing about this is you actually now also have a way of showing progress as a startup. It's because the job of a startup is to reduce uncertainty. That's it. Beyond anything else, your job is to go and get information, and that information should tell you that you're more or less likely to reach $1 billion or $30,000 a month or whatever your level of ambition is. And as you start narrowing the ranges on your hypotheses, because you ran a survey with even 100 people, or you just talked to 5 people, you just talked to 5 people and you recognize that before you have this hypothesis that everybody in America would want your product and it would be 330 million would be your target audience. And you just talked to 5 people and you realize that, wow, only one of them was actually interested. So couldn't I reduce then my level of uncertainty and say that, okay, maybe it's not going to be 330 million, but it's going to be higher than 0, maybe 100,000 people, and it's going to be lower than 200,000 people. Even just that level of reduction of uncertainty will be visible on these charts. It'll be visible in the sensitivity analysis. The sensitivity analysis will tell you when the level of uncertainty in one variable is small enough that you can switch focus. It will tell you when the level of uncertainty has actually reduced the range and help tell you, like, yeah, you're actually more likely now to reach that $1 billion mark. And so that is, that for me is like one of the best things in the world here, is that I can show progress as an entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur in a company. I can show that my level of uncertainty is increasing, and I can now place a better bet because I know the odds. Diana is asking, can you play with the hurricane chart? Absolutely. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a link. But if you are just absolutely desperate, go to chromatic.com, go to a little thing that says toolkit, and just type in the word like finance in the search bar, and you will find a whole bunch of Excels and Google Sheets. They're all open source. They're like I Creative Commons them, so you can feel free to play around. I don't guarantee there's not a bug in there somewhere. There probably is. I'm known for my typos, but feel free to play around and feel free to email me and ask questions. I was a musician for 10 years, but I am a math geek at heart, so I'm really happy to talk about this stuff. Aside from that, floor is yours, John. I've rambled on for long enough, so I'm happy to answer questions or compliment Norris's hat some more.
Yeah, that's cool. So are there some critical questions? We have 5 minutes left. If people have questions, throw them into the chat or speak now. And we'll get you the information you need to work with this.
I see a question from Annie, and the quick answer is yes. You can do that. You can actually just copy the histogram to another chart, or copy the Monte Carlo output from one spreadsheet into another if you want to decompose your calculations.
Yeah, so Dennis is asking about larger opportunities. And at least in my mind, when he talks about larger opportunities, I start thinking about go-to-market strategy. And so you might want to do this kind of thing for each of the sub-markets that you're working in. And my question for startups is, since startups are typically not profitable, what's your fastest market that gets you to cash flow positive? And let's work with getting there fast. And then let's work on the middle market that will get you to some kind of rational margin, and then let's work on how to get to the bigger opportunity. Elham is asking about whether it's chromatic. Yeah, good. All right. Other questions?
I can say one other thing about that, which I think is interesting, especially for those of you in corporations, is that it's one step beyond this, kind of not the intended target here, is that if you just do this for market sizing, and what's going to happen as your output is you're going to wind up with 2 bell curves. Like, this is the size of the market. It's going to be somewhere between 1 million and 100 million, maybe somewhere around 50 million. You do that for 2 possible opportunities, even if they're different technologies, and you only have the option to invest in one. You're going to see the overlap in those 2 histograms, those 2 bell curves. And if they do not overlap at all, you know which one to invest in. If they do overlap, you can start calculating the value of information to run an experiment or get a research report to reduce the level of uncertainty, and then make your decision based on that. And that is a really nice way to demonstrate ROI.
Yeah.
Oh, Tristan, plug your course on that. Thank you, Norris. We have a course on this. There's an innovation accounting course, which we'll probably be running again in November. Please sign up for it. We'll also send you a link later, but I'll put a link into the chat. And thank you, Norris. I'm super bad at plugging stuff. You're my hero today. You and your hat.
And one of the things we have difficulty with Meetup without paying money for Meetup in the big thing is getting email addresses from people. And so we will post it to the Meetup group and people will be able to access it there. It'll come through the Meetup as opposed to through your email.